No matter what kind of music you want to write, understanding how chords and harmony work in each genre makes writing much easier. In this video, I'll be breaking down nearly every common chord you'll hear in punk, emo, and the many subgenres under those umbrellas. Let's start with open chords. These are usually the first chords you learn on guitar, so they're a natural place to begin. Open chords are built from a triad, root, third, and fifth. Take an open C major chord. Even though it uses more than 3 strings, every note is just a repetition of C, E, and G. You don't need to memorize this right away, but it's useful to know once you start creating chords that build on this basic foundation. Open chords aren't used in every style of punk or emo, but they show up a lot in offshoots like folk punk or cowpunk. Early punk bands like The Clash, The Replacements, and the Sex Pistols made heavy use of them too. Each open chord has a major and minor version, so it's worth learning both. E major, for example, would be open low E, 2nd fret on A and D, 1st fret on G, open B, and high E. To make it minor, lower the 3rd by a semitone. In this case, that means playing the G string open. Let's take a listen to how these might sound in a punk context, using the Flatliners song Carry the Banner. Next up, bar chords. They work on the same triad principle as open chords, but the big advantage is that you can move them anywhere on the neck. Bar chords appear in all kinds of punk, from early punk and pop punk like the Ramones or Buzzcocks, to hardcore or skate punk like Black Flag and the Descendants. You really only need 2 shapes: a major bar chord, root on the low E string, bar all 6 strings, then form that same E major shape from earlier with your remaining fingers. You can then move this shape anywhere on the neck. Minor bar chord, same idea but form an E minor shape by moving that major 3rd note down a semitone. This can also move anywhere on the fretboard to play any minor chord. The same applies when starting on the A string, but with these slightly altered shapes. These are helpful to memorize too, as you may want to fret chords closer together, rather than always keeping the root note on the low E string. It can also help to include the low E string in these shapes even when the root note is on the A string. That way you don't have to fully reset your hand position every time you move to a new chord, which makes switching easier and keeps string noise to a minimum. A lot of early punk bands either didn't have a lead guitarist or relied more on chords to create both progressions and riffs. Power chords are common here, think Lexicon Devil by The Germs, or Helena by the Misfits. But for a bar chord example, check out the Descendants' Suburban Home. Dyads are 2-note intervals, technically not full chords, but they're everywhere in punk and emo. Common dyads include power chords, major and minor thirds, tritones, and variations of these intervals. Sometimes open or bar chords can sound too dense, so smaller shapes are used to give a tighter, more focused sound. Common dyads include a power chord, 2 notes a perfect 5th apart, or 7 semitones. For example, 5th fret low E plus 7th fret A. Tritone, move the higher note down 1 fret or 6 semitones apart to create a tense and dissonant sound. Major third, move that note down a further 2 frets or 4 semitones apart. Minor third, 1 fret lower than the major third or 3 semitones apart. Major 6th, back to the starting power chord shape, then move the higher note up 2 frets or 9 semitones apart. Dyads can be combined to form progressions using the same type for the entire progression, or a combination of all the ones shown. Joyce Manor's Last You Heard of Me is a great example of a song that uses just major and minor thirds for its progression. The order of notes changes the texture. It's another way to get even more out of these simple shapes. In a power chord, for example, putting the 5th below the root note makes the chord thicker, even though it's still the same dyad. Traditional inversions require a third or fifth, but with dyads, simply rearranging the notes can create a similar effect. For example, placing the third as the lowest pitch gives the chord a different texture. A sound that is often reinforced by the bass guitar in styles like skate punk. In these cases, the bass will sometimes play the lowest note of the chord rather than the root note. Finally, let's look at colourful chords, things like sevenths, ninths, and suspended chords. These chords aren't always used in every punk or emo subgenre. In some styles they're almost entirely absent, but in others they're a defining part of the sound, like post-hardcore, Midwest emo, and certain forms of Japanese punk. These include a major seventh, built on the same major triad you use for open or bar chords, but with one extra note added, the major seventh. Minor seventh, same principle, but this time you start with a minor triad and add in a minor seventh on top. Suspended chords replace a third of a chord with either a second, sus2, or a fourth, sus4, creating a sense of tension or anticipation that usually resolves when the chord moves to a major or minor triad. Ninth chords go a step further by adding the ninth interval to a triad or seventh chord, producing even richer, more complex textures. These chords are more ambiguous than standard major or minor chords, giving a richer harmonic bed for melodies. Swapping basic chords for colourful ones can dramatically change the feel, even if the melody stays the same. For instance, if I play the same lead guitar riff but swap the basic major and minor chords out for some more colourful variations, you can hear how this affects the overall feel, even though the melody remains the same. You can also throw one or two colourful chords within a standard open chord progression to give it a more distinctive sound, particularly when the progression lands on one of these chord types. A great example of this can be heard in the Menzingers song Toy Soldier. Now you've got a good grasp of the chords behind punk and emo, the next step is to connect them with lead parts, and rhythm plays a huge role here. I'll show you why in this video.